And to the very distinguished filmmaker here who made this movie what it is, Ali Abbasi. All right. Well, congratulations. And we are going to open this one up to questions from the audience. Ali's really curious as to what you think about the film. It's been a long journey. It's been a very long journey.
Not over yet.
I know. That's what I want to ask you first. This movie keeps evolving and its story keeps gaining importance. And did you have any idea that the adventure you'd be on when you came up with this?
No, but I do remember I made a movie before this called Holy Spider, which is a movie about a serial killer or a guy who's extremely religious and is killing prostitutes in Iran. At the time it premiered, a lot of the like more left-leaning liberal media friends and critics, they were like, this is a misogynist movie and it shows like depicts violence against women, blah blah. And then incidentally, really, it sort of fell upon the whole, woman life freedom movement of that time, and suddenly this whole thing changed, and it was like, this is a symbol of woman life freedom movement, and I was like going there, and nobody wanted to talk about a movie anymore. They wanted me to represent the women on ground. Like I'm not representing anyone.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I feel a little bit of the same shift happening with this movie. When we premiered in Cannes, like some of my friends came and was like, it's a very interesting movie, blah, 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 but it's like, you're too soft on him. You're too soft on him, And I'm like, what do you mean too soft on him? And then kept saying, and then it was like, oh, there's nothing new about this guy, and how about, what would you do if MAGA people likes this, I'm like, what am I supposed to do, But then I think what I'm sensing lately in the past few weeks, even before the actual election and election results, that people's mentalities are shifting, saying like, oh, this is not an act of ambivalence, this is an act of resistance.
Yeah.
It's not this kind of resistance, it's a kind of, let's investigate what happened to us and what will happen to us, instead of just saying it's bad. Yeah. And that's why I sort of have a little bit of that deja vu,
Well, it's really interesting. I assume he still hasn't seen the movie. He hasn't watched it, or at least is not admitting to it. I'd be very curious. But when I looked at the movie, I thought it was, I had an odd reaction, particularly in the first half. I said, well, you know what? I don't think he would dislike it. I think this is who he is, and he recognizes that. And I think as base probably would see, except for a couple of scenes.
You know what's really interesting? I think you can find it on YouTube, but I don't know if you know this, actually. I think Gabe Sherman, the writer, sent it to us, was after our movie had even come out on Telluride, and even I think came out on October 11th, he put out an ad to vote for him, and it was all the footage, not from the movie, but it was Rona Barrett interview, which we cover a little bit. It was him talking to Oprah. It was him as a young guy, and sort of like it was interesting that he had, he decided to bring back his past and in a way with this new ad. But
what was it for you taking on this role? What was your?
It was someone just asked me about my LDL levels, and I was like, that they went 50% higher than when I took my blood test a year ago. I mean, it was psychotic. It was just like, it still is psychotic because
career-defining LDL level.
Yeah, because life and the work has gotten blurry. It's had so many different lives. The thing of trying to get it made and then hurrying up and making it in crazy conditions in below zero Toronto, in between the holidays, very limited daylight. Being in the chair at 4 a.m. and then working with Ali, who, as you can see, could have made a very simple, conventional movie where you're just sitting there watching two people talking the whole time, but instead wanted to shoot this in a very specific way and allowed us also to improvise. And so Jeremy and I really had to kind of almost have a PhD in fucking 70s New York, and who was the mayor and who was the pitcher for the fucking New York Yankees, and what was the Roy Cohn interview he gave in the Times in the week before I met him, in case that was coming up in the scene. And there was a lot of stuff that facts and things. And so as a way, there was no other life outside of it, you know, when we were making the movie. It was just full on every minute.
And you know, thank God for Tom Ortenberg, who's a friend of mine, and who does put this out there, because it seemed like the industry in a lot of ways was just very much afraid of this. I want to stay away. The same way right now you're seeing, now that he's the president-elect, that all these people are afraid of him, of saying no to him, of you know, insulting him in any way, or confronting him.
I think what's maybe more troubling is people are afraid of complexity, you know? It's like, I don't think the world has ended with his presidency. Like, you know, sorry to, you know, be blunt or whatever, not tell you what you don't want to hear, maybe. But I think there's a lot of investigation needs to be done in how this happened, what happened, you know? And it needed to be done before, it needed to be done now, it needs to be done after. And I think that sort of ambivalence, and that's like, yeah, this might not be a disaster, but what's good about it, what's bad about it, I think that's the kind of space people really don't want to enter.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they sort of, you know, I was looking at, I don't know, this is a banal thing, but like Morning Joe guys.
Oh yeah.
Just yesterday.
Yeah, and you know, they were like, made a career of bashing this guy.
Oh.
And then I was like, no, we went to Mar-a-Lago, we talked about our differences, and you know, and I'm like, you know, you can see it as changing side or being opportunistic or whatever. You can also as being as, you don't want to deal with complexity, do you?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like either way.
Yeah.
And I think the problem with this, and I've been, you know, it's been a funny experience this week for me, because I've been with so many executives, so many people, even like in the hallways of here, they're like, incredible movie, amazing movie, we love the movie, Sebastian, so good. I'm like, why didn't you buy it?
Yeah.
Oh, you know, this is kind of thing. Oh, my aunt was sick that day, and you know, and I'm like, you know, at some point, look yourself in the fucking mirror, and let's say like, you know, you don't need to necessarily be even brave, but you know, if you don't give this a chance, which I honestly think the most provocative thing with this movie right now is like, why is this provocative?
Yeah.
You know, why is this material provoke anyone? You know, and I frankly, I think that is the part that worries me most. You know, that mentality.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you know, to me, it's a very important movie, and it's the kind of movie Hollywood didn't used to be afraid of making, you know?
But that was the thing, like, I mean, just to piggyback on that, I mean, I can't, you know, out of respect, it's like, I don't, you know, I'm not here to name anyone, but the amount of love that I've received, you know, from some of the biggest, you know, both of us, I think, in terms of actors, directors, producers, writers who have seen the movie and they rave about it. But then, for instance, you know, I had an offer to do variety actor on actor
Oh yeah.
this Friday,
Uh-huh.
and I couldn't find another actor to do it with me because they were too afraid to go and talk about this movie, so I couldn't do it. You know, and it doesn't matter. That's okay. That's not to point a finger at anybody. You know, I've gotten to do a lot of great things, and that's not pointing at anyone specific. It was we couldn't get past the publicists or the people representing them because it was too afraid to talk about this movie. And it's like, that's when I think we lose the situation. Like, because if it really becomes like that fear or that discomfort to talk about this, then we're really going to have a problem. There was an OPA that came out that I sent to him in New York Times recently that I thought was really interesting, which said we have to stop pretending that Trump is not one of us. You know, and that's a really difficult thing to deal with at the moment, and I understand the emotions are very high, but I think that's the only way you're going to grasp this film. All it's saying is you cannot keep casting this person aside, especially after they get the popular vote. Should we not give this a closer look and try to understand what it is about this person that's even driving that? Or, you know, and I don't know if the love is going to translate into action, but certainly it's there from what we're hearing. But
I think that's so key, because trying to understand this, not just him himself, who always refers to himself as, oh, Trump, he doesn't say me, is the people that, as you just said, he won the popular vote, or he's winning the popular vote, and they are like behind him. They voted him in again with everything. So what is the underlying thing here about this man? And a movie like this can begin to explain it. And certainly, before we go to the audience for questions, his relationship with Roy Cohn is, through to this moment, what drives him, what defines his life and his way of looking at things. And that is in this movie so key.
Yeah, and you know, I just want to give like a little parenthesis about the whole party politics of it. You know, I mean, Ms. Trump used to be, I've said it many times, so apologies for people who've heard it, used to be a pro-abortion Democrat.
Right.
His dad was a lifelong Democratic donor. Roy Cohn was a Democrat. What does that tell you about party politics in America? You know, the Morning Joe is on MSNBC. Who made MSNBC? Roger Ailes. What else did he do? Fox News.
Yeah.
Same guy, and within the space of 3 years. So I think also, you know, when we're just, I guess for me again as an outsider, I do understand that, you know, a lot of people, including actually myself, who didn't want him to be elected. I for the simple reason that I think he's an incompetent manager, you know, and I like your country, you know, so I hope better for the country. But nevertheless, I'm like, it is a democratic process, and the point of a democratic process is like whoever people want to choose, they choose.
Yeah.
And you can't tell them, oh, you were wrong, you chose the wrong person. You're like, oh, okay, that is the choice.
Right.
And it has a legitimacy. And it's difficult to square that, okay, well, this guy who, you know, is undermining these things, who, you know, maybe has a, you know, empathy deficit and whatever, has legitimacy. But I think that is the complexity you have to look at now. That is like, how can this guy has legitimacy? How does that look like, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe they just want an authoritarian and they want a different way of life, and they look, you know, this goes on around the world. You know, it's interesting to see your point of view from being not from this country, but interested in why.
Yeah, and you know, I think some of this has to do, like going back to, you know, Roy Cohn. There's a punk rock aspect to these characters. It's like they don't mind standing in the shifting sand and talk about the time. Meanwhile, on the other side, on the good side, whatever, they're like, oh, let's not talk about it. Let's come revisit this 20 years when it's harmless and when like we have made up our minds and we have consensus, you know? And that's where you lose your pulse on reality. That's where you, and I think this sort of like, you know, being quick on your feet, being, you know, able to deal with reality, being able to like control and create and manufacture the narrative, that all comes from Roy Cohn, obviously, as well.
That's fascinating. Okay, does anybody have any questions out there? Take it right here. Yes, sir?
Question for Sebastian. I just wanted to know your kind of approach to playing the younger side of Trump before he kind of met Roy Cohn, since I think a lot of my generation kind of knows him as the guy, obviously the former president, but the guy who was on The Apprentice, and, you know, this kind of this very famous, popular figure. So how'd you kind of go about playing the younger version of him?
it's interesting you were talking about that show, The Apprentice.
Do you want to repeat that before so they could hear it?
He was asking, I think, how I approach playing the younger version, because you've grown up with the Apprentice version and the current president. And we started talking about how actually Donald Trump has reinvented himself a few times, almost every decade. You know, and if you start tracing it, the humanity keeps getting lost, but there's defining periods of time, you know, where he's shifting and blending in. I think that's honestly where I hate to say it, he's pretty good at, you know, and we're still living in the apprentice stage of him, where he really learned how to become this and because he's always watching himself, and he's basically recycling a version of himself, which is why he's mannerisms and all of these things have gotten more pronounced in a way. But I think back then, you know, if you look at just, I mean, you know, Netflix, The American Dream. I mean, if you go back to Rona Barrett, which is on YouTube for an hour long, you get a guy who can't look you directly in the eye for too long. He's shifting in his seat uncomfortably. He's even talking about family and love being more important than money. I mean, there's things that I never thought, you know, I would hear him say or do. I mean, I think that's what makes it fascinating is trying to understand what happened, right? Because if it happens like that, you don't want it to happen again, or you want it to recognize in yourself, right? To not let it happen to you. You know, it's just the regular job is, you know, you're learning an instrument at that point. You know, you're watching and you're listening repeatedly over and over and over again until it becomes like very part of you, and you're doing it without thinking. But at the end of the day, you got to understand what's driving the person, and that's where it's difficult. Maybe we don't want to look at that. We haven't been wanting to look at that. We'd rather see the Alec Baldwin thing because it stays removed from us. If I know that there was a father who maybe whatever betrayed him and sent him to a military school, and God knows what happened to him, where he maybe was abused or not, or whatever, now suddenly, you know, it gets more complicated. But that doesn't mean that you have to trust him. That doesn't mean you have to, you know, bow down and just accept the situation. It just has to mean, do you honestly feel like someone like that is the right person to make a decision that's going to affect, you know, your children? Because they're going to feel it more than we are, right? So it's just, anyway.
And yeah, way up there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you guys fucking nailed it. You nailed it. On stage at the March, you know, at the wherever we do the awards. Sebastian, you were wonderful, and Jeremy, again, wonderful. Enough of that shit. You've got Ali. For a guy that's not born in Ohio, you nailed it too. How are you going to get this film out? Is he stopping the distribution of this film? Is he?
No, it is out. Believe it or not, it's, you know, it's so, you know, part of what happened through the release of the movie is, you know, when we were in Cannes, they sent us a cease and desist letter. And that scared like all the major studios and whatnot. And you know, Tom came in and, you know, like the last second and really helped us. But also, you know, indie distribution is not pretty like in its whatever normal circumstances. Now we're like real underdog. We spend a lot of our money, which was supposed to go to like, you know, P&A advertising for the movie, to buy out our amazing investors who wanted to do a pro-Trump movie. That's a bizarre story in itself. Like, why would you do that? Like with me and you? I mean, I don't understand. Anyways, so by the time we came to October 11th, we were underfunded. We had, you know, very little time to prepare. We, you know, everything was late, and frankly, we weren't helped by the fact that neither Meta nor Google nor TikTok or whatever let us do advertisement for the movie because they said it's political content.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, you know, these guys decided what's political content for the world. Yeah, so bearing that in mind, I think we've done well. I mean, we sort of broke even with the budget internationally and all that. I'm happy about that, not because the money is important. I'm happy because the narrative that, you know, Trump and his supporters and everyone was trying to make is the movie flopped because nobody wanted to watch it. But the actual thing is, I think, and that's how I'm seeing things shift now.
Right.
That people actually are like yourself, like people are realizing, okay, the movie exists. They try to stop it, but like, is it out now? You know, a lot of people don't even know. You know,
I didn't know.
I mean, you're sitting here at the screening of it. You know.
I saw the screening come across my email, and I just immediately RSVP'd and got here early. And it wasn't packed. I think Jeff Bezos, like the guy who is not going to do, he's afraid. The guy who owns the LA Times is afraid. But you guys got to go for the award. That's your saving grace. Because
I agree with you.
I have to say, I'm getting the rap sign over here. She's afraid. Everyone's afraid. We're all afraid. I know you have a lot of questions, but yeah, we gotta go. So, all right, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. My question goes to both of you, but before I make it, I wanted to say that when you're talking about the distribution, I come from Ecuador, and back home, like, people were excited like months ahead before the release, and like first weekend it sold out completely. I remember my brother telling me like it was sold out, so I know the movie's doing great. So my question is, in the process of filming this movie, do you feel there was a certain time period, scene, or particular moment that you felt the most pressure on as an actor and as a director?
I mean, every second felt like life or death or something. I mean, I hate saying it, but again, because it's just because of who we're dealing with, and because you're exhausted. Like, I get it. Like, we're all exhausted of this fucking person. I don't know, or some people are not. But I, you know, that was not my job. Was to try to, you know, we were trying to get to the truth of it, and looking at all of the facts, and we had to look at all of the things in the 70s and 80s, and why he had been on the cover of Time magazine back then, as he just was, you know, or why was he on Oprah and Larry King and GQ, and why they were saying he was the first contractor to hire women, you know, like why these things existed, and not just like focusing on the worst things, obviously, but so I think the pressure for me was just to try to get you to be able to continue on this journey in a way, given what you know and what you expect walking in this room, but I can't imagine what he's.
I have a concrete answer, actually. Not that this wasn't concrete, but it was poetic. No, but remember the day we did the last scene. You know, when we wanted to do the last scene, that was the scene where, so like the whole journey of the movie and the characters is like, okay, you see this guy in the making. You know, you see him like coming up, you're starting to have someone recognize some of the movements and some of the gesticulation and all that, but it's not him. It's not this person that you recognize. Then the last scene is sort of, you want to sort of capture that guy. And suddenly I think I felt, and certainly you felt, I remember, okay, this is it now, it's much more slippery, because now you have to be so close. Now you're really almost, if you're not careful, in Saturday Night Live territory, but you also have to be extremely serious because it's serious. And that was difficult, you know, because it's like at some point I'm like, do I want more of him? Do I want less of him? Like how much is enough? And it almost felt like we should have sort of made the movie first, like shot all the other scenes, and this saw the journey, and it's like, how do we want to finish it? Obviously we don't have that, you know, we didn't have that luxury. So I think keeping that balance, and I remember you were, you know,
worried.
Yeah, you were worried. I mean, I was also worried. I didn't tell you, but you know. But yeah, that one I remember specifically, you know. Yeah.
Thank you so much.